What if humanity is not the underdog we've always believed ourselves to be? What if we're the ones who change the fate of the galaxy? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. In a galaxy filled with advanced civilizations, humanity's presence is often underestimated. But when an alien empire targets Earth, they quickly learn that humans fight in ways they can't predict. Join us as we witness the rise of humanity in the face of overwhelming odds, a story of war, resilience, and the power of love. The galactic arena hung in the depths of space, an immense, floating structure made of glistening metallic surfaces and intricate geometric patterns. Suspended within the heart of a colossal space station, it mirrored the brilliance of the stars surrounding it. The arena's sheer scale was overwhelming, dwarfing everything in its proximity. Above, the starlit expanse stretched endlessly, a vast canvas against which this momentous event would unfold. Spectators of all shapes and forms sat in rows that spiraled high into the dome-like structure of the arena, the ambient hum of excitement filling the air. These alien beings, whose features ranged from translucent, ethereal figures to towering, jagged creatures, watched in eager anticipation. Their eyes glimmered in the dim light, reflecting the shimmering holographic targets that began to materialize in midair. The targets moved with precision, darting and flickering at increasing speeds, creating a visual display of light and motion that held the audience's attention. The sound of their rapid movement echoed across the vast space, adding an almost musical element to the competition. The stakes of the Galactic Alliance's annual shooting tournament were high, and this year, the humans had been invited to participate for the first time. K-Thax's thoughts. From his elevated seat, K-Thax, Grand Marshal of the Arcturian Defense Force, sat with arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Lieutenant Maria Reyes. His mind churned with disdain, each passing second only deepening his frustration. The humans, primitive in their technology and ways, had no place here. His people, the Arcturians, were centuries ahead in every aspect of technological advancement. How could anyone take these humans seriously with their primitive weapons? Projectiles and chemical propellants, he could barely stomach the thought. He scowled, his ridged brow furrowing further as he observed Reyes adjusting her weapon. It was a simple thing, sleek and metallic but utterly unimpressive. His disgust was palpable, but he held his tongue, steeling himself for what was to come. What a farce, K-Thax muttered under his breath. This will be a waste of time. The platform upon which Lieutenant Reyes stood seemed almost comically small compared to the vastness of the arena. Her hands, steady and poised, gripped the sleek rifle, nothing more than a relic by galactic standards. The weapon appeared out of place, a simple tool amidst the dazzling advanced technology surrounding her. From the rows of alien spectators, a soft chuckle echoed through the stands as they looked upon the human competitor. Her weapon was so rudimentary that it seemed almost laughable. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, and some aliens, too superior in their technological advancements to understand the simplicity, exchanged disbelieving glances. Reyes, however, stood unmoved. Her focus was complete. In her eyes, there was no trace of uncertainty, no sign of hesitation. She had trained for this moment her entire life. Despite the absurdity of it all, she had a job to do. The first holographic target appeared, a standard motion pattern. Its trajectory was predictable, a familiar rhythm for the seasoned competitors. Reyes inhaled deeply, her chest rising and falling in the still air. She aimed her weapon, the sights aligning with the moving target. The shot rang out with a sharp, metallic sound, but it missed. The projectile flew far beyond the target, missing by nearly half a meter. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd like wildfire, and K-Thax's lips curled into a sneer. K-Thax, to his aid. Pathetic. The neural responses aren't fast enough for this level of competition. This is an embarrassment. His voice was low but filled with a biting edge, his irritation already mounting. He leaned back in his seat, settling in to watch what he was certain would be a string of failures. The humans didn't belong here, and this only proved it. Maria Reyes didn't flinch. She stood motionless, her posture unwavering, as though the laughter of the crowd and the failure of her first shot were of no consequence. The second target materialized, its movement swift and erratic, designed to test reaction time. She aimed once more, but her shot, like the first, missed, this time, veering off in an entirely different direction. The crowd's amusement grew louder, their laughter ringing in K-Thax's ears. But Maria remained composed, her face a study of calm determination. Each subsequent shot followed suit, all missing the targets by varying degrees. By the fifth shot, her performance was nothing short of a spectacle, a series of misfires that only fueled the growing mockery. K-Thax, snorting in disbelief. This is a joke. How could they be so incompetent? These creatures have no place in the tournament. But then, something strange happened. Maria Reyes, without showing any outward signs of frustration, fired again. This time, a shot ricocheted off one of the distant security barriers. The bullet struck at just the right angle, causing the barrier to break apart, scattering fragments across the range. Some of the debris collided with three moving targets, causing them to malfunction. The targets froze mid-motion, caught in a chaotic disruption that no one had anticipated. The silence that followed was deafening. K-Thax sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing with growing confusion. What he had dismissed as random failure suddenly seemed deliberate. K-Thax, softly, to his aide. What just happened? The aide glanced nervously at the screen, observing the malfunctioning targets. It was an accident, Grand Marshal. Just a stray shot. But K-Thax didn't believe that for a moment. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. There was something more to it than mere incompetence. Something far more intricate was unfolding. As the rounds progressed, more anomalies occurred, each shot seemed to strike something unexpected. A bullet struck a support column, sending vibrations that disrupted the projection systems of the targets. Another ricocheted off a water pipe, causing a reflective spray that distorted the sensor readings, further confusing the system. It was as if Maria's shots were not aiming at the targets at all, but at the very environment itself. The arena was descending into chaos, with targets flickering and freezing mid-air, their movements erratic and unpredictable. The once predictable, timed event had been transformed into a chaotic mess, a spectacle of disorder that no one had anticipated. K-Thax, leaning forward in his seat. This is impossible. These shots, are they deliberately causing this? The arena buzzed with the electric hum of the targets, their holographic forms flickering in midair. The air itself seemed to thrum with anticipation as Lieutenant Maria Reyes took her next shot. Her rifle discharged once again with a sharp crack, and once again, her aim missed, far off, the shot soaring through the air like an arrow gone astray. It was becoming a pattern, one that the audience couldn't ignore. The murmur of disbelief grew louder, then quieter, as the reality of the competition set in. K-Thax, growing irritated. Every single shot. Missed. The humans, they can't even hit a stationary target. This is absurd. But something strange began to unfold as Maria readied herself for another shot. The arena's atmosphere was thick with confusion, a sense of unease creeping through the crowd. Despite her apparent failure, Lieutenant Reyes remained calm, unaffected by the growing laughter and whispers echoing through the stands. She adjusted her grip on the weapon once more, her movements deliberate, as if she were performing an ancient ritual rather than a futile attempt at precision. As the next target appeared, a swift, darting figure moving at incredible speed across the range, Maria's rifle hummed. The shot rang out, yet again missing the target. But this time, there was something different, a peculiar sound as the bullet ricocheted off the security barrier on the far end of the arena. A sharp, metallic ping echoed through the space, followed by a flash of light as the bullet careened off at an unpredictable angle. K-Thax, leaning forward in disbelief. What was that? His eyes widened as he watched the ricochet. It wasn't just a random deflection. The bullet struck a shard of the security barrier, sending jagged metal fragments hurtling through the air. In the blink of an eye, the shards collided with the path of three moving targets. Time seemed to slow as the targets abruptly froze mid-motion. A ripple ran through the projection systems, the once fluid and calculated movements of the targets now locked in place. The audience fell silent. The silence lingered for just a moment before the first ripple of realization spread across the stands. A ripple of disbelief, followed by a quiet gasp. This wasn't supposed to happen. It couldn't. It was impossible. Maria didn't even flinch. She lowered her rifle slightly, calmly observing the disruption she had caused. The targets, once vibrant and flashing with precise movements, were now nothing more than still holograms suspended in midair. The entire arena seemed to hold its breath. K-Thax, incredulously, to his aid. This is not possible. A stray shot caused the entire system to freeze? His aide, who had been furiously jotting notes, looked up, equally stunned. Sir, it appears so. But I don't understand. It's as if the shot was intentional. Maria adjusted her stance, undisturbed by the chaos she had just triggered. Without hesitation, she took another shot. This time, the bullet ricocheted off a support column. The arena, a marvel of engineering and design, shuddered in response. The vibrations from the ricochet rippled through the structure, causing a cascade of disturbances. The targets, which had been flying steadily and predictably, now veered off course. Some flickered momentarily, as if they were glitching in a malfunctioning system. Others jerked unpredictably, their paths distorted by unseen forces. The atmosphere in the arena thickened with confusion. The once orderly competition had descended into a chaotic mess, all of it stemming from a series of seemingly random shots. Yet Maria stood there, her expression impassive, a calmness in stark contrast to the pandemonium she had caused. With every shot, the malfunctioning system grew more erratic. Another shot rang out, and this time, the bullet struck a water pipe high in the rafters. The sharp crack of metal echoed through the arena as the pipe ruptured. Water sprayed from the burst, a fine mist filling the air, sparkling under the artificial lights of the arena. The fine mist created a strange, almost otherworldly effect. It refracted the light, distorting the sensors in the target systems. K-Thax, sputtering in disbelief, his voice rising. No! What is she doing? This isn't a competition. This is chaos. The mist swirled around the targets, distorting their movements, causing the sensors to flicker and malfunction. The once perfect holograms now quivered and spasmed, unable to maintain their trajectory. The disruption was complete. The targets no longer obeyed their programmed paths, they were drifting aimlessly, caught in a system-wide failure. The alien spectators, who had initially chuckled at the humans' apparent incompetence, grew increasingly silent. The mood shifted from amusement to confusion, then to unease. Eyes once filled with laughter now searched the arena, trying to make sense of what was unfolding. The air was thick with disbelief, and a sense of discomfort began to spread through the stands. This was not what anyone had expected. As the system continued to falter, the aliens' unease grew. The Arcturian delegation, once poised and confident, exchanged wary glances. They had never seen such a display of unpredictability. The usual calm of the galactic elite began to crack. What should have been a moment of easy victory had turned into a chaotic spectacle, one that no one had predicted. K-Thax's aide, who had been tasked with drafting a diplomatic message, now hesitated. He could sense the shifting tension in the air. The humans had proven themselves to be an unpredictable factor, one that was beginning to cost the galaxy's elite a great deal of face. K-Thax, leaning in toward his aide, his voice low but sharp. Draft a message. Tell them to withdraw before this embarrassment goes any further. But even as he spoke, K-Thax's gaze remained fixed on the human competitor. Maria Reyes, unfazed by the chaos she had caused, calmly adjusted her weapon again. There was something deeply unsettling about her composure. She wasn't scrambling to fix the system, nor was she retreating. She wasn't aiming at the targets at all. No, she was calculating the environment, every shot, every ricochet, every disruption, all of it designed to create a cascade of effects. She was playing a game they didn't understand, a game where the rules were not defined by precision or order, but by the unpredictable forces of chaos itself. And as K-Thax watched, he realized that this was no accident. K-Thax, to himself, under his breath. This is no accident. She's making it work. She's not playing their game, she's rewriting the rules. The arena's once perfect system was falling apart, but Maria Reyes wasn't trying to fix it. She was bending it to her will. And for the first time in his life, K-Thax felt the gnawing sensation of fear. The arena, once a beacon of precision and order, now lay in disarray. The bright, holographic targets flickered and spasmed, their movements erratic and unpredictable. The once methodical projections had transformed into chaotic, unstable images. Some targets darted frantically in a blind zigzag across the range, while others hung motionless, trapped in the web of disruption that Maria Reyes had woven with each seemingly errant shot. The air was thick with the tension of uncertainty, a feeling that permeated the crowd and left an eerie quiet over the spectators. The final scores flashed on the screen, a haunting combination of numbers and metrics. Maria Reyes, the human competitor, had achieved the lowest direct hit count in tournament history. The audience, silent as the grave, could scarcely believe their eyes. But it was the second statistic that left them speechless, the highest neutralization rate ever recorded. She had failed to hit the targets with precision, yet in doing so, she had neutralized them in a way no one could have anticipated. It was an enigma, a paradox. The holographic targets, designed to test the finest minds and the sharpest reflexes in the galaxy, had been outwitted by what seemed like random chaos. K-Thax, his voice barely a whisper, the fury barely contained. What is this? How did this happen? His eyes flitted between the screen and the wreckage of the arena, where the malfunctioning targets continued to flicker and twitch, caught in the aftermath of Maria's unconventional strategy. He was seething with frustration, his mind struggling to grasp the significance of what had just occurred. This wasn't how the competition was supposed to work. It was meant to be a test of skill, a demonstration of mastery over technology. Instead, the humans had thrown that idea into chaos, had shattered the very fabric of the game. But Maria Reyes, standing still in the center of the chaos she had created, was completely unfazed. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the turbulent arena around her. She did not move, her rifle was now lowered, held loosely in her hands. Her eyes scanned the arena, a faint glimmer of satisfaction crossing her face, though she remained silent. She knew what had just happened, and for her, the result was not a fluke. It was the outcome she had intended all along. The crowd remained still, the silence hanging thick in the air. But then, Admiral Chen, Maria's commanding officer, stepped forward. His presence was like a quiet storm, his calmness an anchor in the turbulent chaos of the arena. With measured steps, he made his way to the front of the platform, his posture confident and unshaken by the events that had transpired. The alien officials watched him closely, their eyes filled with suspicion and, perhaps, fear. K-Thax's piercing glare was directed at the Admiral, but it was clear that Chen was not intimidated. Admiral Chen, with a calm smile. "Yes, you're right, Grand Marshal." Lieutenant Reyes didn't aim for the targets, but then again, the tournament rules never specified direct hits. What she was doing was mapping the environment, setting off a chain of events that disrupted the entire course. The targets were never the point. K-Thax, gritting his teeth, his voice dripping with frustration. "This isn't how competition works. Your species perfected precision, but we learned to think outside the box. We mastered chaos." K-Thax's words hung in the air like an accusation, a bitter acknowledgement that his understanding of the tournament, and perhaps the universe itself, had been challenged in ways he couldn't fathom. His mind was spinning, the concept of what had just unfolded beyond the limits of his comprehension. The humans had disrupted not just the tournament but the very idea of competition. Chaos, unpredictability, and lateral thinking, these were not things he had ever had to account for in his calculations. The galaxy had always relied on precision, technology, and order. The humans, however, had turned that all upside down. Maria Reyes' gaze remained fixed on K-Thax, but her expression was unreadable. She didn't need to say anything. The Admiral's words had already done the work for her. What had happened in the arena was a triumph, but it was not one of brute force or sophisticated weaponry. It was a triumph of the mind, of thinking in ways that were completely alien to the galactic elite. As the alien officials began to murmur among themselves, discussing the implications of what had just transpired, K-Thax was forced to admit to himself the unthinkable. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had won without ever actually hitting their targets. They had used the environment, the very arena itself, as their weapon. Each shot, each miss, had been calculated to disrupt the arena's systems, creating a cascade of chaos that no one had expected. K-Thax, to himself, his voice low but tinged with a growing respect. This is not how we fight. But maybe this is something we need to understand. His fingers clenched the armrest, his thoughts a whirlpool of conflict and realization. The humans, with their primitive weapons, had disrupted the most advanced system in the galaxy. They had used their unpredictability to achieve something that K-Thax and his kind had never even considered. It was a strategy that didn't rely on control or precision, but rather on disrupting the very foundation of what was known. It was genius, in its own twisted way. Maria Reyes was not just a soldier, she was a force of nature, unpredictable and impossible to pin down. What K-Thax had seen as a weakness, the randomness of her shots, was in fact her greatest strength. And that strength, he now realized, could not be countered with the conventional strategies that had won the galaxy's wars for centuries. The walls of the War Council room were composed of dark, reflective panels, their surfaces shifting like the ebb and flow of deep space. The air was cool, tinged with the sharp scent of ozone from the nearby communication consoles. In the center of the room, a large, circular holotable flickered to life, casting a faint blue light that illuminated the faces of the gathered Arcturian officials. K-Thax, his face a mask of concentration, stood before the table, watching the replay of the tournament unfold before him. Each shot, each miss, had been meticulously recorded. The footage played in slow motion, a haunting sequence of erratic, seemingly random shots that struck the environment in unexpected ways. At first, K-Thax had dismissed it, believed it to be nothing more than incompetence. But now, as the images danced across the holotable, a cold realization settled into his bones. The arena's pristine order had been shattered, not by accident, but by design. The arena, designed with intricate, near-perfect precision, had been turned into a playground of disruption. Each bullet, fired in what seemed like an aimless direction, had been calculated. K-Thax watched as the ricochets danced from metal surfaces to support columns, each impact causing a new cascade of effects. The holographic targets, once invincible in their precision, were now vulnerable to the forces of nature, vulnerable to Maria's strange, seemingly chaotic strategy. Narration, K-Thax, reflecting. This is disturbing. I cannot fathom it. The humans didn't follow the predictable patterns we depend on. They didn't even aim for the targets, and yet, they disrupted everything. They didn't play by the rules, they bent the rules, broke them, and turned them into something else entirely. How can a species so technologically inferior be this unpredictable? If we ever faced them in battle. The last part of his thoughts hung heavy in the air. If they ever faced the humans in battle, what would they do? The cold, calculating strategies that had won countless victories for his people would be useless against a species that didn't rely on precision, but on the very chaos that governed the universe. The images continued to flicker across the holotable, a bullet striking a support column, sending tremors through the arena and causing malfunction after malfunction. A stray shot breaking a water pipe, releasing a mist that interfered with the sensor systems. The entire environment had become a weapon, an extension of Rhea's unpredictable thinking. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, calculated chaos. She had transformed the arena into her battlefield, using the environment itself to disrupt the system. It was a strategy that defied everything K-Thax had known. The holotable flickered once more before K-Thax's eyes, and the room fell into a thick silence. His gaze was unblinking, fixated on the recordings. He could feel his thoughts churning, racing to catch up with what his eyes were showing him. This was not just a mistake. This was an entirely new kind of warfare, one that relied not on the destruction of the enemy, but on the destruction of the system itself. K-Thax's eyes narrowed as the recording continued to play, watching the final sequence in which the targets malfunctioned, their movements erratic and unpredictable. The moment when the system had completely broken down. The human lieutenant had created a ripple effect, a chain reaction that had disrupted not only the targets but the very infrastructure of the tournament. It was nothing like anything K-Thax had seen before, a terrifyingly brilliant form of warfare. At his side, his strategic advisor, an old and stoic Arcturian general, watched in silence. His expression was unreadable, though the lines of age and experience were etched deeply into his face. As the last of the footage played, he folded his arms across his chest and exhaled slowly, as though preparing himself for the weight of the truth. Strategic advisor, grimly. We've observed similar behavior in human tactics before, Grand Marshal. It's not a one-time fluke. It's called thinking outside the box. They don't operate within the confines of conventional strategy. They look at a problem, and instead of finding a direct solution, they find a way to disrupt the entire system, making it work to their advantage. It's chaotic, unpredictable, but it works. The advisor paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. K-Thax's brow furrowed deeper, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his expression. The realization hit him hard. The humans were not bound by the same rules. Their strategy was a form of combat he couldn't understand, chaos, disorder, improvisation, tools that had no place in his carefully calculated world. Strategic advisor, continuing, with a sharp edge in his voice. If we face them in combat, we will have to prepare for an entirely different approach. Our strategies, our precision, won't matter. The environment itself could become our enemy, disrupted in ways we cannot predict. And that is something we have never been prepared for. The truth of his words struck K-Thax with a force that almost knocked the breath from his chest. He had underestimated the humans. He had seen their primitive weapons, their unrefined technology, and had believed them to be nothing more than a curiosity. But in doing so, he had overlooked the true threat they posed, not in their weapons, but in their minds. The advisor's words echoed in the silence of the room, reverberating in K-Thax's thoughts like an echo that wouldn't fade. We've observed similar behavior in human tactics. The advisor had spoken the truth. The humans had mastered chaos, a force that could not be controlled or predicted, but could be harnessed. K-Thax's grip on the edge of the holotable tightened, his knuckles going white. His mind raced through the possibilities. If they faced the humans in battle, everything would have to change. Every tactic, every plan, would need to be reconsidered. For the first time, he felt the real weight of his own arrogance. The humans, with their primitive ways, had shown him that the greatest weapon in warfare was not precision, but the ability to think in ways that could never be anticipated. K-Thax, softly, to himself. This is not how we fight. But perhaps it is how we must learn to fight. The War Council room was bathed in the soft glow of artificial light, its sterile atmosphere broken only by the holographic displays hovering in the air. The air was thick with the scent of metal and the faint hum of advanced technology that pulsed from every corner of the vast chamber. The walls, made of dark obsidian-like material, reflected the glowing data streams that danced across them. Outside, the stars were just visible through the transparent walls of the high observation tower, each one a cold, distant point of light in the vast emptiness of space. Yet, inside, the room felt heavier than it ever had before. It had been a year since the Galactic Tournament, the day that shook the foundation of K-Thax's understanding of strategy and warfare. The Arcturian Grand Marshal, once confident in his people's superior tactics, now found himself grappling with an unexpected truth. The humans, with their primitive weapons and erratic tactics, had upended everything. Their victory wasn't based on precision or technological superiority, but on something more fundamental, their ability to embrace unpredictability. K-Thax sat before the holographic displays, his fingers lightly brushing over the console. He had reviewed the footage countless times, each time seeking to understand what he had missed. The humans had done something no one could have anticipated. They had used chaos, not as a weakness, but as a weapon. They had transformed every shot, every misfire, into an opportunity to disrupt the system, to turn the environment itself into a tool of warfare. And now, he needed to learn from them. Narration, K-Thax, with a hint of respect. I knew we needed to understand this. The humans, their unpredictability. They don't follow the same rules, they don't think the same way we do. And that's precisely why we must learn from them. If we ever face them again, we'll be ready. We can't afford to be unprepared. His voice, once filled with scorn, now carried the weight of a reluctant respect. The realization had come slowly, but it had settled deep within him. The humans, though technologically inferior, possessed an ingenuity that could not be overlooked. They were wild, untamed, and that unpredictability had given them the upper hand. K-Thax had asked for them, needed them, to be part of the Arcturian team for the upcoming war games. If they were to face the humans again, they would have to be ready for anything. The war games were taking place on a vast, open training field, a replica of the alien landscape that had been devised for combat simulations. The field stretched for kilometers in every direction, with uneven terrain, mountains, valleys, and artificial structures designed to test every aspect of a soldier's skill. The air was sharp and dry, tinged with the scent of ozone from the energy fields that marked the borders of the arena. The Arcturian team, still the most advanced in the galaxy, stood in tight formation, awaiting their next orders. But today, they would face something new. Maria Reyes stepped onto the field, her movements calm and deliberate. She held her weapon in one hand, the same simple, unremarkable rifle that had caused such a stir a year ago. The weapon seemed almost comical in its simplicity, surrounded by the sophisticated, gleaming weapons of the Arcturian soldiers. Yet, Maria's presence carried a quiet authority that drew the eyes of all who were watching. Her footsteps were light, but firm, as she approached the center of the field. K-Thax watched her approach from a distance. His gaze, once filled with disdain, was now tinged with something else, curiosity, even respect. He had never been one to admit his miscalculations, but the humans' methods were too effective to ignore. The challenge now was not to dismiss her, but to integrate her chaotic genius into his people's strategies. As she reached the center of the field, Maria paused, raising her rifle with the same steady hand she had used in the tournament. She scanned the terrain, her eyes moving from one obstacle to the next, calculating, anticipating, considering every possible angle. She was not concerned with hitting the targets directly, her focus was on the environment, on what could be used to her advantage. K-Thax stood among his soldiers, his expression unreadable, but his mind was sharp. He had seen the humans' methods firsthand, and today, he would witness it again. Maria Reyes looked up, her gaze meeting K-Thax's across the distance. There was no challenge in her eyes, no defiance, just a quiet confidence that spoke of someone who had already learned what the Arcturians had not yet fully grasped. She gave him a slight nod, acknowledging his presence without a word. It was a gesture that said everything. She didn't need to prove herself to him, she had already done that. Maria Reyes, smiling slightly. They thought we were bad shots, Grand Marshal. They never considered we weren't aiming at what they thought we were. Her voice was calm, almost playful, but there was a knowing in her words, a certainty that pierced the air like a dagger. It was the same strategy she had used before, chaos, disruption, and the manipulation of the environment to her advantage. She wasn't here to play by their rules, she was here to rewrite them. K-Thax's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, a flicker of unease passed through him. It wasn't about precision. It was about perception, about seeing the world in ways that no one else could. The Arcturians had always relied on their advanced technology and their perfected methods of warfare. But the humans had shown him that the world could be bent, shaped, and used in ways they could not even begin to understand. Maria Reyes took her first shot, not at the nearest target, but at a structure on the far side of the field. The bullet struck the corner of a pillar, sending debris scattering into the air. The shockwave from the impact disrupted the surrounding sensors, and the targets nearby flickered and malfunctioned, their movements erratic. The Arcturian soldiers flinched as the chaotic disruption rippled through the training field. The targets, once perfect in their mechanical precision, were now rendered useless by the simple, elegant strategy Maria had employed. The Arcturians' weapons, designed to be flawless in their execution, could not compete with the unpredictable nature of Maria's approach. Kathak stood still, his expression unreadable, but his mind was already racing. The humans' tactics were not an anomaly, they were the future. If the Arcturians were to survive the coming wars, they would have to adapt. To think like the humans. To embrace the chaos that Maria had so expertly woven into the fabric of battle. What do you think? Can humanity truly stand against the might of alien empires? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of humanity's fight for survival. Keep watching, because the greatest battles are yet to come.